This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From custom domains to beautiful websites using their easily customizable templates that you can have up and running in minutes, e-commerce, email and email marketing, SEO, analytics and scheduling, Squarespace does it all and has done it for us for the last 6 years. If you are a small to mid-sized business in any industry, Squarespace is the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial. And if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code Hugh at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. So, what do we have here? A brand new 25.2 megapixel micro four thirds sensor with equally new Venus processing engine encased in a refined GH5 body, offering a no limit internally recorded DCI 4K up to 120 frames per second, 10-bit 420, up to 60 frames per second, 10-bit 422, no crop. Also, internally recorded 5.7K up to 30 frames per second, 10-bit 422, Apple ProRes or ProRes HQ up to 60 frames per second, 10-bit 420, and a cray number of additional resolution, frame rate, aspect ratio, log, and gamut combinations, including anamorphic, variable frame rates between 1 and 300 frames per second in full HD, V-log, and V-gamut. You get the idea. B. A whopping 7.5 stops of in-body image stabilization, allowing handheld 100 megapixel multi-shot stills, hold that thought, and then C. A no bullshit integrated fan that does not impair the camera's dust, splash, and freeze resistance. D. An S1H style tilty twisty zippity doo-dah day rear panel. E. The best autofocus system Panasonic has ever produced by a significant margin, hold that thought. And then a whole bunch of other stuff, from 13 plus stops of dynamic range, 75 frame per second burst rate with single autofocus, an electronic shutter capable of 1/32,000th of a second, in addition to a mechanical shutter, which, by the way, suffers less rolling shutter effect than I've ever seen on this kind of camera. Hold that thought too. You know what? Nah, what the heck? Let's show you that right now.
Close your eyes, hear the voice within, calling. This heavy load got under your skin, howling. You got the white knuckles holding on it tight, keeping your feelings bottled up inside, heading for collision in the night. To really live, you gotta die breathing.
Continuing on, there's USB power delivery available while recording, a new high-capacity battery, dual card slots including one high-speed CF Express Type B, 4-channel audio, a larger, better grip, which I do like, mildly updated controls like an additional recording button on the front of the body, a dedicated autofocus mode button like the one on the full-frame S series, which I like very much, a novel dedicated mic button, all of which contribute to beautiful and easily accessible imagery and audio at a launch price of $2,200. And those are just the headline features. Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant, and today I want to talk to you about Panasonic's just revealed Lumix GH6, a camera 5 years in the making. But this is going to be a relatively short video because we only received the camera a few days ago and had to slot it in a pretty crazy schedule. But it's enough time for me to understand what it is that I'm seeing, so I will just cut to the chase, though have no fear, there will be more videos from us about the GH6. For now, let's put it this way. 1. This is a state-of-the-art, heck of a hybrid storytelling machine at an incredible price, full stop. It will likely become a darling, the new darling of the indie filmmaker set all over again. 2. The autofocus has improved so much that even YouTubers like us can now do basic talking head video shots without background flutter like, this. Whack-a-mole product shots like this. Even a relatively low contrast object like this. Or a tiny object like this, if you get it right. Let's see if I can do this. There's a trick, I'll tell you. And conspiratorial lean-in shots like this. Now, I'm shooting without any custom settings, just out of the box, full area with human detect, which is now 315 points rather than the original GH5's 225. Oh, and tracking shots like this, which I'm about to show you, taken without a gimbal, although with Small Rig's excellent new cage for the GH6 with top handle and left side grip. No stabilization in post, although Claudia is a much better op than I am, but you get the point about the autofocus tracking, and I, for one, was surprised and delighted. Switching to photography for a moment, because now we have 25 megapixels. For the very first time, we have a sub-full-frame camera that can capture handheld, multi-shot, computationally immersed images. Okay, with a little tweaking in post, and yes, under the right circumstances, and not most circumstances, that give even a Nikon Z9 a run for its money with shots like, well, look at this. But with all of this said, there are areas where the GH6 system does not rise to the standard set by the best full-frame or APS-C systems. First, even with the 13-plus stops of dynamic range, it is still not a match for top-tier full-frame cameras, although the differences in dynamic range, as measured by the website Photons to Photos, reveal smaller differences than you might expect with the GH6's immediate predecessor, the older sensor-equipped GH5 Mark II, especially near base ISO, so I'm looking forward to what other reviewers have to say. Second, and I think this is actually a bigger issue, one can argue that the Micro Four Thirds native mount lens ecosystem of high-end autofocusing primes, even with lenses like the $1,300 Leica DG 12mm f1.4 or $1,400 42.5 f1.2 Nocticron, even with Olympus's Pro series. Most of their zooms as well, actually, are a bit long in the tooth compared to Sony's full-frame G-Master series, Nikon's full-frame Nikkor Z1.8s, or Sigma's full-frame DGDN Art and I series. Or, for that matter, Fujifilm's APS-C coverage lens line, especially with the arrival of their newest and expanding list of next-gen primes. I'm talking here about the 18, 23, and 33 1.4s. And I'd agree with you. That's because most of these lenses were designed at least half a decade ago, when the target for matching lens optical performance to sensor resolution probably did not anticipate going much beyond 20 to 24, maybe up to 30 megapixels. I mean, I'm guessing, although here we are 8 years after the launch of the GH4 and we're just hitting 25 megapixels in Micro Four Thirds, holding pat for the moment at 26 megapixels for APS-C. In the meantime, lens design, optical, autofocus, and industrial, material sciences, manufacturing, and objectives for lenses in general have evolved since then, driven by developments in the full-frame space, where Sensor resolution and dynamic range, lens resolving power, field curvature, distortion and chromatic aberration correction, speed, and most recently, to my delight, size and weight reduction have all moved forward dramatically. Which is why, to concretize this, on the one hand, the newer and excellent $1,800 690-gram Panasonic Leica DG Vario Simulux 10-25 1.7, announced less than a year ago, became our daily driver, far surpassing the image quality of what had been many people's go-to, although I never really liked it, the Leica DG Vario Elmer 12-60 2.8-4, introduced with the GH5 in 2017. Yet, on the other hand, we subsequently sold our GH5 and switched to the full-frame Sony a7S III, eventually settling on Tamron's even newer, even better to my eye on the a7S III, half the price, 3/4 of the weight, $900 540-gram 28-75 2.8 G2. Another example? Take that flagship Nocticron, jewel of the Panasonic prime lens lineup when it was introduced in 2014, and compare it to Sigma's $200 less expensive, if 200 grams heavier, 85 1.4 DGDN Art launched in 2020. I will tell you flat out that the Sigma outperforms the Nocticron across the board optically, gives up nothing in the way of mechanical build quality, while simultaneously delivering 1.5 more stops of, call it selective focus, that is shallow depth of field wide open. Although, to be fair, that shallower depth of field is usually not a huge advantage for us here at Three Blind Men and an Elephant, where we usually prefer a little extra depth of field for portraits, say, at 6 feet. Wide open at f1.2, the Nocticron offers a depth of field of just 2.5 inches, still not enough to render tip of nose to back of ears sharp, compared to the even thinner 1.5-inch slice available from the Sigma 85 at 1.4. In fact, much as I own and love the 85 1.4 for its image quality and autofocus performance, it's right over there, I've just bought Sigma's little $650 92.8. It's just under half the price of the Nocticron, 130 grams lighter than the Nocticron, and absolutely superior to the Nocticron, and at the same 6-foot distance, gives up just half an inch. We're talking 3 inches instead of 2.5, which is even better for what we do most often, which is street portrait. Sometimes we like shooting at f4. None of which may matter to you, and that's fine, so let's move on. Third, it is still the case that the nod for autofocus performance goes to Sony and Canon, now Nikon too with the Z9. Now, this is probably because Panasonic still has not elected to embrace face detect autofocus, or perhaps it may be instead because they have ways to go with algorithms and processing power. Maybe some combination of both, I don't know. In any event, this advantage is most apparent for sports, wildlife, and since I don't shoot wildlife, and we were in New York, aircraft like this. Surprisingly good at the start on the 50-200 Vario Elmer, racked out to 200 millimeters, but then, SpaghettiOs as usual. And in product showcase shots, as soon as I get fancy, like trying to get the camera to focus on an object not blocking my face, or an object more than a few inches in front of my face. Of course, now it works. This is where our Sony a7 IV with hybrid phase detect loses focus less often, notice precisely what I just said, than the GH6, which is really nice when you don't want to block the teleprompter, even if you're the one who has written the script. Fourth, there does not appear to be reason to believe that Micro Four Thirds sensors will catch up to full-frame sensors in terms of resolution and dynamic range anytime soon, most likely ever, because in any case, resolution is a moving target across all sensor formats, and the manufacturers have decided full-frame is where it's at. Which, fifth, is a good time to segue into the larger point that the Micro Four Thirds ecosystem does not have the momentum or aggregate budget available for R&D and new tooling that full-frame has, with all that this implies. And finally, sixth, there are a number of small nits I'd pick with the GH6 if I were being piggy, but because I am not, I will include some of them here simply for completeness. Panasonic has chosen not, for example, to increase the resolution of its EVF, although this doesn't bother me particularly. I think the unit that they have right now there is fine. More importantly, however, the GH6's rear panel is not as bright as I'd like it to be in broad daylight, even set manually to full brightness. Less importantly, the GH6 doesn't have a more au courant dedicated physical hybrid mode switch to shift between stills and video like the Nikon Zs or Sony a7 IV. I wish it did. It does not have the more comfortable and accessible on-off switch collar around the shutter release of the S1H and G9 as I recall, and what the hey? It doesn't have Bluetooth audio transmission so that we could monitor our video through our wireless earbuds, and I really wish somebody would do that. Let's wrap it up this way, for now, by coming at it from a different angle altogether. Think of the GH6 as a pint-sized, half-price Panasonic Lumix S1H, but with better autofocus, way better IBIS, one of those two card slots now CF Express Type B capable, no crop 4K frame rates up to 120 frames per second, and a couple of extra megapixels thrown in for stills. Would you be willing to give up the S1H's 5.7 million EVF? Greater dynamic range and better low-light performance, at least not equalized for depth of field. The lens options available to you from the L-Mount Alliance. Or imagine the GH6 as a 2/3 the price Sony a7S III with twice the megapixels and pixel shift enabled high resolution stills, as good or likely better thermal management, a twice as fast CF Express Type B card slot, better ergos, better handling, better menu system, more flexible rear screen, way better IBIS, even higher resolution video, anamorphic squeeze and de-squeeze, wider variety of aspect ratios. Would you be willing to give up the A7S III's 9.44 million EVF, along with its marginally to significantly superior, depending on use case, autofocus, greater dynamic range, better high ISO performance, again, at least not equalized for depth of field? Would you be willing to give up the Sony E-mount lens ecosystem? You could just as easily contemplate the GH6 as a 9/10 the price A7 IV with the same 3.7 million OLED EVF. I mean, I think it's the same. The spec is the same, but with vastly superior video capabilities, better ergos, better handling, better menu system, better thermal management, more flexible rear screen, way better IBIS and rolling shutter performance. Would you be willing to give up the A7 IV's extra 8 megapixels, the 1 or 2 stops hidden dynamic range, blah, 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 blah? You're getting the rhythm here, right? What about the GH6 as a $200 more expensive Nikon Z6 II with far superior video capability, superior IBIS, more flexible tilty flippy zippity doo-dah-day rear screen, yada, yada, yada? Would you be willing to give up? Right, the kind of stuff I've already mentioned for the Sonys, plus the top plate LCD and the Nikkor Z lens line, which I think is fabulous. What if you conceptualized the GH6 as a $200 less expensive, 20% more megapixel, vastly more competent video version of Canon's R6? Or pick whatever other camera makes sense to you. You get the point. These are the questions, and anthropomorphized GH6 practically demands you consider an amazing set of questions, really, given that these are all full-frame cameras, and the answers might well surprise many of us. But please do share your answers in the comments section below. Now, Before we sign off, and I'm already exhausting myself, let's consider 2 more cameras that are not full frame because you know you want to. What about the just released OM1? What about the rumored Fujifilm X-H2? Well, truly, I can't offer an opinion on the OM1 because I stopped trying years ago now to get my hands on cameras from Olympus. Their sales team consistently did not follow up on my requests, even when we spoke in person at trade shows. If the new spin-out wants to send me one to review, I'd be happy to give it a go. As for an X-H2, that is a really interesting question, especially because most of you know how much I like Fujifilm. On the one hand, heads up, friends at Fujifilm, the GH6 is the new sheriff in the sub-full frame 60-40 video stills hybrid space. Yes, I just made up that sub category, but the point is obvious enough. If an X-H2 arrives this year with the rumored 40-plus megapixel APS-C sensor and delivers all of the GH6's video goodness in one body rather than 2, as has also been rumored, then one might expect it to be the next new sheriff in town, actually irrespective of video stills use ratio, a home run. Though Fujifilm faces the same momentum and budget considerations versus full frame that Panasonic and OM do. Failing that, however, Fujifilm might have an XH1 style problem on its hands all over again. That is a product that took too long to get to market and was immediately surpassed by a more properly considered video competitor at a more aggressive price. Lastly, perhaps the most interesting way to think about the GH6, the way Panasonic no doubt thinks about the GH6 itself, may well come from indie filmmakers. Because for those of us who are indie filmmakers, the GH6 could be the first hybrid mirrorless camera so performant for what you need and want, so reliable, so inexpensive, even compared to rentals. And of course, you can put hardcore cine lenses on that mount, that it takes its place among dedicated video cameras like Canon's Cinema EOS series, Panasonic's Varicams, Blackmagic's various cameras, even Arris or Reds, not only as a B cam, but an A cam too. But again, that's just me. And I really would like to know what you guys think. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From custom domains to beautiful websites using their easily customizable templates that you can have up and running in minutes, e-commerce, email and email marketing, SEO, analytics, and scheduling, Squarespace does it all and has done it for us for the last 6 years. If you are a small to mid-sized business in any industry, Squarespace is the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial. And if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code Hugh at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe, join the conversation below because this is an incredible audience. If you'd like a copy of our Streets of New York, the book, head over to www.3bmep.com/books. If you'd like to schedule a one-on-one video session with me for a portfolio review, explore or hone your artistic voice, select gear, and more, sign up at www.3bmep.com/booking. Finally, consider supporting our work by using our no-cost-to-you affiliate links down below, picking up some official Three Blind Men and an Elephant swag at 3bmep.threadless.com, sending coffee money via PayPal, or best of all, join us as a patron over at Patreon. However you choose to support us, as always, we thank you for it.